run out of material, you could always tell some amusing anecdotes of your various misadventures.
Okay, I'll do that. So, Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to go ahead and open us in prayer. So, Father, we just thank you for this morning. We thank you for your word, what your word imparts to us. Lord, I ask today as we open up your word that we can see things that you want to show us even about our own lives in this, and how the story moves forward, and dynamics. And Father, there's so much richness, and there's so many questions in the midst of it. So Lord, I ask today that we just dig deep and find new revelations of you and how you want your family to operate. And I ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, so our portion today is Parashat Chaye. Is that correct? Chaye. Sarah. It's called the life of Sarah. It starts in Genesis 23:1, but actually it's the death of Sarah. And because it starts out with Sarah's life was 127 years, so I know that's why they started out with the life part, and then she died. So 127 years, I mean, that's a good long life. She lived in Hebron. She was buried in Hebron. So, but I have a few questions just in this little opening portion of Sarah's death. Now, some believe that Abraham and Sarah were separated at the time of her death, that he was living in Beersheba and she was living in Hebron. Some believe it's because she found out what happened with Isaac, like if you go back to that portion, that they weren't together anymore. Some actually believe that Sarah died while Abraham was taking Isaac up the mountain out of grief and shock, because she knew. So that's the whole thing. We don't know, like, did Sarah know ahead of time what Abraham was going to do? And, you know, which would make sense of this whole, like, the stress of, you're going to go do what? You know, we waited how long and you're going to take our son and do what? Or when, it's kind of interesting when they come down off the mountain, it says where Abraham and his men went, but it doesn't say where Isaac went. And I've heard people say, well, yeah, because Isaac kind of had to go off on his own and process what just happened, you know? It's like a little bit of trauma there. Dad was going to kill me, you know? And understandable. And I love the fact, it's like the scripture doesn't exactly tell us. There's a lot of writings on it, but they're all speculation of, you know, how did Isaac process this? How did Sarah process this? Were they separated? I mean, there's all of these dynamics on this, and I sat with this just a little bit, and I thought, you know, how would I respond as a mom who, my only kid, my promised kid, you know, I know that the Lord had spoke to her a few times, but the bulk of the speaking to was to Abraham, and she jumped on board and went. I mean, she had faith, right? But his faith was so strong to the point where he lifted his arm to kill his son, right? Would she have gone along with that as a mom? Did she have the faith? Like it says that Abraham had the faith that even if he had slain Isaac, the Lord would have raised him. But we don't know if that's where Sarah was on it. And when you look at family dynamics of husband and wife, of you want both of them to be in agreement on something, but ultimately a lot of times the male or the husband is the final say on a lot of decisions. Depends on, you know, there are households where probably women have a lot more pull than others. But to have your partner tell you all these things that God is telling them, and for you to have the faith to believe, yeah, this is what God's telling them, when it seems completely absurd. Like, why would you ever kill your son? Yes, other nations were doing that, but from her perspective, why would you do this? And I also thought about the fact that, though, this is the same woman that said, send Hagar and your son away, and he did it. So in her mind, she might have even been thinking, well, he sent Ishmael away. Maybe he would do this. Maybe he would, if God told him to do this, maybe he would do it. And so it kind of would break my heart to think that they had separated, although I can see where that would be. But we're looking at honest family relationships. And when I was reading through this, I was catching the dynamic of husband and wife, father and son. I'm going to say the servant was Eleazar, even though he's not named. And in a sense, that could have been his best friend. He's the one he trusted. So we've got those type of dynamics going on, and we've got all of these people putting their trust and faith in the fact that Abraham is literally hearing from the Lord. And some of those could be really big leaps for these people to believe this if they haven't had that encounter.
There's another possibility with Abraham and Isaac, although he, like you said, he did raise his hand, but possibly God knew he wouldn't be able to do it, so he gave him, he heard the bleat of the goat or lamb or whatever it was, and gave Abraham his out. I mean, like my dad drew back on me once, so he went that far, but then he stopped, and maybe that God told, okay, I don't want you to fail in this, so I'll save you. I'll give you an out.
Well, the binding of Isaac was a test of Abraham's faith, and it says, again, Abraham believed, if I go ahead and do this, he'll raise him from the dead. So I don't think Abraham was looking for the Lord to give him an out.
No, he wasn't, but God was giving him an out.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, we had mentioned just briefly, and I'm really trying not to backtrack. I'm really trying not to go back to chapter 22, but the binding of Isaac is super important. And it does lay down a foundation of how this moves forward. It's super important because we see the whole tie of, again, like we mentioned last week, the first time the word ahava for love, we see the love of a father for a son. Same phrase used for the love of the father for the son. So we see this father willing to sacrifice his son and a father who did sacrifice his son. So that whole foreshadowing there is really important. The fact that it happened on Mount Moriah is super important. Location. Mm-hmm. That ends up being the location of Solomon's temple, where how much sacrifice went on that location from the one sacrifice that started there. It's a highly important place. And just the whole level of, I love the fact that when Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on Isaac, his son, so we see the same way Isaac carried that wood for the offering, Yeshua carried his cross for his sacrifice. I mean, there's so many parallels in that story that's amazing that we could actually just plant ourselves there for a solid hour, but that's not our portion. So,
and I didn't get there fast enough last week. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and that was the other thing. It's like Emma had so much stuff that went on in her portion, like story, right? And then we get to chapter 23, and it's like everything just winds down, like to one story that actually is like almost retold 3 times in the chapter, the same instructions, the same, but you also kind of sit there and think, why did it slow down? I mean, why was it important enough we speed through all this stuff and then we slow down. And so when I kind of looked at that, well, first I want to start out with Sarah's life was 127 years old. Sarah died in Hebron. Hebron, and Emma, I don't know if you got to see this at all when you were in Israel. I don't know where all you were at. But Hebron is located in the West Bank. It's called the Tomb of the Patriarchs, but it's also called the Abrahimi Mosque. So there's a mosque built on top of it. There's been wars that has separated in half, like at one point in time, mosque on one side, synagogue, temple on the other side, and then they were like accused, well, some of the people from the synagogue damaged the Quran, and then they got mad about that, so then they went and burned a whole bunch of the scrolls, and I mean, so this has been trying to coexist. I mean, if you can't coexist in the land, how you coexist in that type of thing where they're both claiming this is our father. And honestly, it is both their fathers. But they both, I believe, think that they are the son of the promise. And that's where that's where the battle comes in. And that's what Asher and Trader has done so much work trying to get the Arab-Israel relationship back together in all of this. And it's like, if you can bring Arab Christians and Messianic Jews, which are the only way you're going to get Jew and Arab relationships back together, and if you can progress in that, that's amazing. Because think of how long that fight's gone on, right? I mean, it's been a really long battle here. So she's buried there, and it says after he mourned, he went there and mourned. I believe he deeply loved her. I mean, long time together, they went through a lot of stuff, and even if they were separated, he still deeply loved her, and he came to bury her. And so it says, and this is kind of where I want to start going into the mindset of land, seed, and blessing. Because the very first thing he does after he mourns her, he rose up and he spoke with the sons of Heth. And we get into the story of him stating to them, starting in verse 3, Abraham rose from before his dead one and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am an outsider and a sojourner among you. Give me a gravesite among you, so that I may bury my dead from before my presence. So right now, he wants to, first he says, give me, okay? So we got to look at these words. Like, did he really think that when he first said, give me, that they were going to give it to him? Because he offers to pay for it, right? And here's the thing that I found out about customs in this area. This is what kind of where the give word shifts up a little bit, is it says that, where did I write it down? In some of the commentaries, it states that an alien resident was not allowed to purchase real estate. So this was kind of a big ask in some ways for him to say, give this to me. And I think in his mind he knew that. And I also love the way that he identifies himself to them. You know, he says, I'm an outsider and a sojourner. He doesn't say, I'm the anointed of God, and God gave me your land, and this is my blessing. He comes with a level of humility stating, basically I'm an alien here. And I love their response to him, because they say to him, you're a prince among us. So we're looking at, the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, listen to us, my lord. You're a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the best of our graves. None among us will withhold his grave from you to bury your dead one. When Abraham got up and bowed down to the people of the land, to the sons of Heth, and spoke to them, saying, if you are of a mind to let me bury my dead from before my presence, listen to me. Plead with Ephron, son of Zorah, Zophar, on my behalf, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah that belongs to him, that is at the end of the field. At the full price, let him give it to me in your midst for a gravesite. So again, this word give, it's sell. You know, it's the way it's translated, because he's saying, give it to me for full price. So obviously he's not saying, give it to me. He's just saying, make this agreement with me. But I do love their response, because he sees himself one way, but for them to respond to him, you are a prince of God among us. And I think a lot of times we see ourselves one way, and it is good to see it in a humble way. You know, you don't want to go, he didn't walk in and go, I'm a prince of God among you. You know, he stated how he saw it, and they exalted him. And I think that's beautiful in the midst of that, because when you go in and exalt yourself, but he went in with the right posture. He went in with humility. He asked for this. He asked to pay full price. And I think it was very cool that they offered him the best for free. Like, pick any place you want. I mean, that's huge. Pick any place you want, any piece of real estate. And, you know, even Ephraim offered it to him for free. So here's my question. Why could he not take this for free?
I think, on the most basic level, so here he's been given grand promises of ownership of this entire land, and this is actually an opportunity for him, the very first time in all he's been through, to actually become an owner of a portion of promised land. So I think that's tremendous significance, but I think he feared perhaps they would change their mind. Look at the history of our own nation. The settlers came in, they purchased from the native groups portions of land numerous times. 10 years would go by and say, oh, we can sell that to you. After they paid full price, they have to pay again, and then even a third time in some cases in New England. So I'm just wondering if perhaps he was concerned if it was just given, that could just as easily be ungiven, because there's no legal documentation to like prove anything that it's yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and were you going to say something, Faith?
Well,
Oh,
not yet.
yeah.
I mean, you know.
Because he not only paid for it, he paid for it in front of everybody, right? Like, bring everybody in so nobody could contest this, right? So that Ephraim's son couldn't come back and contest this. And I think to me, it's almost mind-blowing on the fact that the very first piece of property that was purchased where he was buried, to this day is acknowledged that was Abraham's property by both the Jews and the Arabs. They acknowledge this, like the fact that through all of that time, whether it's a gravesite or whatever, when you think of all the moving of land and the repossessing and tearing down and building up that goes on when every single country comes in and takes over something, this one piece of land is still acknowledged as the cave of the patriarchs. And to me, that is amazing. And it was purchased even though God gave it to him. You know, when you think about it, he could have thought in his mind, God gave this to me, which he did. And he still paid for it. And how much did he pay for it?
400 shekels.
400 silver shekels. That was extremely costly.
If I might add, the 1 month salary for a man was typically 1 shekel.
It was when you think about when Jeremiah was going into exile and he had to buy, the Lord told him buy a plot of land. Does anybody know how much he paid for that? 17 shekels. 17. So we're looking at, Abraham knew God's given this land, but he was willing to pay an exorbitant price for something that was given to him. That's how much it meant. Go ahead, Stan.
God gave him the promised land too, but he still expected him to fight for it.
True. Just because God gives you something doesn't mean you don't have to fight for it, pray for it, pay for it, establish it, right? Because how many times, otherwise every time Israel could keep going in there and going, well, God gave it to me, and somebody else, well, God gave it to me, and so you could keep pulling this, well, God gave it to me card. But we have here the first set of ownership. And I also thought maybe one of the reasons he gave such an exorbitant amount for it too is, okay, when somebody dies, and I've noticed this, like even recently I had a friend who had to bury her father and realized that he didn't have like all the he didn't have money to bury him. Like it was a huge scramble, right? But when you bury somebody, it starts making you think about your own mortality. A lot of times you sit there and think, well, I just had to do this. Is everything set going forward? And for me, it also made me wonder, like, okay, so Sarah's been buried. Abraham now is probably sitting there thinking, I'm pretty advanced in age. I don't know how much longer this is going to go on, but I need to get the land promise established. We're going to see him getting the seed promise established and the blessings. And so the very first thing he does, he establishes that land, right? He purchases the land. So, you know, check mark. We've made the stake in the land. And with that, I mean, this transaction is super important. It's the very first time. It's, I think, the very first time anywhere in the Bible that it records land being purchased. So it's kind of sets that ground stake in there. Is the land important? Yes. Is looking, yes.
We talked about his relationship with Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've read where this Abraham's love for Sarah was so great that he wanted to honor her even where she was buried.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is very important to him that she be buried here and honored, and that he was willing to pay whatever price
Yeah.
they came to. It was negotiations. I've read too that the price that was settled on was way beyond what it probably would have been normally worth. That he was taken, but he was willing to be taken in respect and love for his beloved wife, who I find it hard to accept that they had separated because of they'd been together for 127, well, yeah, 127 years. I mean, so it would make more sense to me that we just don't have all the details of all this narrative. So it might seem like, and of course, you know, in that time, you know, it didn't mean you were together every, 24/7. You know, you had dealings to do, things to do, and places to be, and people to see,
Yeah.
So, but in terms of intentionally separating, I kind of find that hard to believe, and I think this reinforces his love and his honor for his deceased wife.
Oh, yeah. And really the reason they come up with that is because it does say he went down to Beersheba, but she was living in Hebron. Now we don't know, he could have, and it says he got up and went. Now a lot of this is like Dennis Prager's commentary uses the verbiage of it would have meant that he got up to travel there. But, also their profession. I mean, they've got sheep, they've got, a lot of times you have your home base and then you have your husbands or the men going out to take the animals to whatever fields. So that could have been why he wasn't there with her when she passed and he had to get up and go there. There's so much speculation to this. And you could see the arguments on both sides. You could see she's just too traumatized that he would have done this to the son, and she's like, yeah, you can go live in Beersheba, I'll stay here. I love you, but I can't look at you right now. I mean, we don't know, and it really doesn't tell you. As females, you could put yourself in that position. As males, you could put yourself, and honestly, we can all sit there and think, how would I have responded? And probably every single one of us would respond differently, depending on how we work, how we, our mode of processing things.
And how
Whether
I
you're
responded to what? To
the binding
Oh,
of
binding.
Isaac,
Yeah.
because that's where they believe this. That's where they believe. I think you might have walked in afterwards.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
commentaries believe that her death was caused because she knew what Abraham was getting to go and do, and so grief of him taking her son, she died. Some teachings believe that. Some believe that when they came back and she found out, they separated because they were in two locations. But we don't know. It's all speculation. All we do know is he loved her, he went, he mourned for her, and he paid a big price for a place to bury her. And he was buried next to her when he died. Now it does say later, I also find it funny that, he took another wife, Keturah, and they had all these kids, which, if he had done that like way after Sarah died, this is like, how old would this man have been when he started having all these other kids? So there's a lot of speculation on that. Like, did he take his second wife, Keturah, while he was still married to Sarah? We don't know. Again, it's all speculation on this. We just know there's a family dynamic going on here. Isaac's not the only son. Isaac is the son of the covenant, but we have an older sibling, and then we end up having a bunch of younger siblings later. So, but we have one person that this covenant is supposed to go through. And at this point in time, his mom dies. He's 37 years old when she dies, and he's not married. And I feel like Dad's like, okay, we need to get this seed thing going, right? He hasn't married. If I'm supposed to have this great, if this was supposed to be a great nation, and this kid doesn't get married, what is this? We can't let this die here. And I'm not going to say Isaac wasn't interested in it, but it doesn't appear that Isaac was in any hurry to move this along, especially if he's 37 years old and Dad needs to go find him a wife. Now, in a lot of customs, fathers did go find wives, but why are we waiting this long? And so then we have the whole dynamic now of Abraham sends his oldest servant to find a wife for his son, which I believe is Eleazar. And it never names it. Like all the stuff that this oldest servant does for him in chapter 24, 23 to 24, he's never named. I just like to call him Abraham's best friend. Because to give somebody a task like that, find the perfect wife for my son, and he also not only tasks him with finding the perfect wife for his son, he tells him, make sure my son doesn't marry a Canaanite. Why should he not marry a Canaanite?
They worship other gods.
Okay.
They're going to be wiped out eventually.
Let's go all the way back to Noah. Why shouldn't he marry a Canaanite?
Yeah, they were cursed.
Yes. Canaan was cursed. And what are they doing? They are living amongst Canaanites, the one that was cursed, and the seed cannot go through the curse. And it seems like, when you kind of compare it to pedigree, that kind of bugs me. It's kind of like, it wasn't that they were being racist or, you're not good enough for my kid. The curse came through Canaan. And if this is going to be the blessed seed, you can't start this all out with a curse. And so the fact that he didn't say any other name, he was just, don't let him marry a Canaanite. Don't let him marry the curse. And so he says, go back to my brother's family and go find him. But he also says, don't let Isaac leave the land. Why?
That's a promise made.
It's a promise. But Abraham left the land. Jacob left the land and came back. So was he concerned that if Isaac left the land, he wouldn't come back?
Well, if he prospered, let's say, like the Jews in Babylon, they prospered so much, most of them did come back, and they built a whole empire there. So it's like, there could be many reasons if he leaves, either he would choose not to go back or be prevented from coming back even.
Mm-hmm. Could be. And I also think from the little bit that they tell us about Isaac at this point in time, Ishmael's not allowed to live near him. His younger brothers get sent away from him. He seems like he's a very isolated kid, or man, he's 37 years old, mourning his mom. And it makes you wonder, maybe Abraham was concerned, this guy's lonely, and if he goes over to family, if he leaves the land and finds family, he may not want to come back here and do this in this by himself lonely phase. And we also have to remember that the covenant has not been renewed between the Lord and Isaac at this point in time. So Isaac is still just kind of going along on the shirt tails of dad, and again has had a traumatic experience. Dad was going to kill him, so we've got this, and mom just died, and I kind of wonder, I think if a inner healing counselor was to step into this situation, they would go, okay, this kid's got some serious childhood trauma things going on here, and, separation from mom, he was, they may have thought, well, he was a mama's boy, let's get some, break some soul ties here, whatever. But I do think that there was this concern, obviously, that Abraham had, that Isaac would leave the land and not come back. Otherwise, he would not have had to tell his friend, don't let him do that. So he sends him out to find somebody, and he trusts him to do it, but he also gives him an out. Like, if you go and try to find a woman and she doesn't want to come back, then I don't hold you to this oath. So, but it does seem like, and I'm going to say Eleazar instead of the servant, because that's just who I think it was. Seems like he was very committed to Abraham, number one, to Abraham's call, because he does talk about Abraham's God a lot in this portion, and he prays to Abraham's God, which I think, within that community, it's kind of like how you had Moses had the primary relationship with the Lord, and then the people followed what Moses told them God was saying. And it seems to me like maybe Abraham was a mini portion of that, like to start with, the Lord spoke to me and everybody kind of gets on board. And I do see some parallels as I was going through this of the end of Abraham's life. He knows it's probably getting close. He's almost 175 years old. So he's trying to establish things. And in the book of Deuteronomy, and it was like we had pointed out that Genesis and Deuteronomy, there's certain things that kind of like parallel. And when I was looking at this, I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a parallel between the end of Moses' life, trying to get everything straight. Like the book of Deuteronomy is like, guys, we got this land, we got this, you've got to do this, this, and this, let's get it going. And here we're getting towards the end of Abraham's life, and he's kind of like, I got to get this land, we got to get the seed going, and we've got to get this promise that's been given to us. This promise has to have a future. And he can't make it happen if he's gone. And you even saw that with, and I think The Chosen does a beautiful job of this. The last days that Yeshua had with his disciples. He's trying to get them to understand. He's trying, like, I'm going to go away and you guys need to keep this going on. You've got a mandate here, but you can't do it for them once you're dead, right? Moses couldn't get the people to do stuff. He couldn't get them to go take the land once he was dead. He had to trust Joshua. And at the end of Joshua, the very last chapter, Joshua was trying to establish this whole thing of take the land, keep the land, do what you're supposed to do. So we see these patriarchs coming towards the end of their lives and being heavily concerned with making sure this promise has a future, making sure that what they've worked hard for, what they've been told would happen, that the next generation catches that fire, that zeal, that desire to move this on. And we even see that, like, when you think about revivals that happen, or even looking through scripture, when Book of Judges is to me, it's so depressing to read, where you just see all this, like, okay, we're going to get it going, and then you just see everything kind of like spiral downward, and then you might have a little spark where you get like a good king or something, and everybody's, okay, we're going to repent, we're going to do this, and then you see it start to, and I think in the same way with all of these patriarchs, starting with Abraham here, we want this to go forward positively, not just spiral out, which again is why I believe don't let him marry a Canaanite. I think in his mind, this whole thing will be cursed and it won't go well. And so even though he's living, like, you have the blessing living in the midst of the cursed people to be a blessing to them. And so everywhere Abraham went, he was a blessing, regardless of the people that he was with. Ultimately, those lives that he touched became a blessing, were blessed. That was his calling to do that. And that's what he wanted his son to do and the future generations. And I think he's trying to establish it in this. Now, we also see another family dynamic going in on this, which is so disappointing. We see Laban's appearance in this. So I'm going to kind of, like, I think you all basically know the story of the courting of Rebecca. She shows hospitality. I love the prayers. It's like, I was kind of laughing at that. Eliezer's first request to the Lord wasn't like, okay, find me a really hot woman for Isaac. It wasn't that. It wasn't like, she's got to be gorgeous so he can fall in love with her. His first thing was like hospitality, right? I mean, beauty can maybe spark an interest, but that's not going to carry a relationship. And she was beautiful, but that wasn't what he was looking for. He didn't set out to only look for somebody who was gorgeous. He was looking for the proper person, and he was looking for somebody who, with the criteria, give me water, water my camels. There's this servant heart. There's this hospitality heart. It's the same type of heart you saw when the three men approached Abraham when he was under the tree, and Abraham was like, serve them. Go get them something to eat. Get them something. There was a servant heart about it, and this, I believe, he probably knew, and the Lord knew, what Isaac needed. And he found somebody who was a servant heart to this. And obviously, and I love this prayer, so I'm going to read it. It was when he first went to go find this one, he had his task, and I'm in chapter 24, and I will start in verse 12. Well, I'll start in 11. Then he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of the water at the evening time, the time for going out to draw water. Then he prayed. Adonai, the God of Abraham my master, he said, please make something happen before me today and show loyalty to Abraham my master. Look, I'm standing at the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are going out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please tip your jar so that I may drink, and she will say, drink, and I'll also water your camels. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. So by this I'll know that you have shown graciousness to my master. And again, so that you'll show graciousness to my master. His heart to fulfill what Abraham wanted was powerful. And he's praying to do this. And I love the little, please make something happen before me today. Do you get the impression that the servant is a little impatient to get this going? And I'm only saying that because when he encounters Laban and tells him what he wants, he also says to Laban, let me see. He basically told him, if you're not on board with this, tell me and I'll go leave and go find somebody else. And how did he do that?
24:35.
Bless one, so give sheep, okay. Let's see, we see here when he encounters Laban, in 33 it said, food was placed before him to eat, but he said, I won't eat until I've stated my business. Then, I thought I wrote it down.
It's he starts this whole, he's explaining to Laban everything, and at the end, verse 49.
49, okay. Yeah, so then it's basically, so now if you're really going to show loyalty, and truth to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me and I'll turn to the right or to the left. So he wasn't wasting time. It was like, if you're not going to do this, tell me and I'll move on. Although I'm pretty sure he felt like, this woman was exactly what he prayed for. But if this was going to be an issue, he didn't want to waste the time. And we see that again when they're getting ready to leave, and Laban and her mother, can we wait 10 days? Just stay 10 days. He doesn't want to be delayed. And he tells them, don't delay me. And so there is this urgency that he has. And again, I wonder if it's like, does he know his master's time is short? What's the big hurry? And I also, though, like this dynamic now that we find with Laban, trying to delay things. We see such a small portion of it. Now, later we see the major delays, right, of what he does to Jacob. But right here we see this, we can do it. And then the next morning, wait, let's wait 10 days. And some of the commentaries and some of the stuff I read, I got a kick out of it because it was like, well, now he realized that this servant had a lot of wealth. He'd just given him all these gifts, right? Well, maybe if I delay him 10 days, I can get a little bit more out of this. And it's like, again, this family dynamic of, the cousin, the uncle, somebody that's trying to delay something. We see more delays and more pushback from a family than we do from that servant who's determined to make this happen.
Yeah, it seems like Eleazar has had this example for so many years. Whenever God told Abraham to do something, he was quick to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't delay.
Mm-hmm.
So he had this example of that he should behave like his master.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. So we're in here, and I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit of this, just because I think the whole dynamic is so important to see the heart of fulfilling this that was in Eleazar. I think it's his priorities, his submission, his acknowledgement. We've got here, even when he's giving gifts, in verse 47, he's retelling the story. This story has been retold basically 3 times. Like I said, it seems to slow, because we were listening to it this morning, and Stan goes, didn't we just hear that? And I'm like, no, this story is told 3 times. I mean, there's, first what he's supposed to do, and then he retells it, and then he retells it to Isaac, to let him know what he had done. So the significance of that, whenever you see something repeated, to me there's a real significance in it. But after he's doing this, he even tells her family in verse 48, I bowed down and worshipped Adonai and blessed Adonai for the God of my master Abraham, who guided me on the way to take the daughter of my master's brother for his sons. So I'm not going to say he played the God card, because that's not really how. I don't think this was manipulative. I think this was very sincere. He wanted him to let him know, I really believe that God led me to this. And, I find it interesting that her father doesn't show up, and he's really not. Her father doesn't show up at the beginning, till a little bit later into this. Like, Laban's handling the negotiation of this, not her father, and really not her mother. So I'm kind of like, but I also wonder, like, if we're not seeing that because we're supposed to look to what then later happens with these negotiations that Laban does with Jacob and how he treats family. Because honestly, this is family, right? And it seems to me like he's always trying to work an angle here with family members. And it's like, have you noticed that sometimes, like, God may tell you to do something, God gives you something, and you may have a friend that's more on board with helping you move along in what the Lord told you to do than your family members? Yeshua dealt with that with his own family members. His mom was on board, but we see that there was, brothers and stuff at first, they were like, yeah, I don't know about this dude, and they didn't like it. And so we see this pushback again from family on here to try to delay the purposes of God. And we saw, I was reading the half-Torah portion. Did anybody read 1 Kings, your half-Torah portion today? So in a nutshell, we've got David dying, and we've got the battle for the kingship going on. And we've got family members taking advantage of family members, and we've got promises that are being made that other people are trying to interfere with. And we've got a very ailing David who they're coming to him asking him to help. And so getting things established in right order. Because at first when I read that, I thought, okay, you know how our half-Torah portion is always supposed to kind of tie into the Torah portion? So I read it. I thought, okay, what am I supposed to, connect to this? So I thought, well, first, they had to go find a young, beautiful virgin to sleep next to David while he's dying. Maybe that's the connectivity. I kept thinking, no, it's got to be deeper than this. It's got to be more than just, Eleazar finds somebody for Isaac and these guys find somebody for David. It's like, no, that's not, it's got to be bigger than this. And that's where I started looking at David's dying, and things need to get set in order. Abraham's coming to the end of his life, things need to get set in order. And so to me, that's the theme that kept running as I kept going through, is things have got to be set in order. And now I don't think there was the urgency on David's heart because he was dying and people had to come and tell him, dude, this isn't working right? But I think he did make promises and he kept his promises. And he had people that made sure those promises were kept. He had a prophet that stepped in to take care of what he couldn't take care of. And it was a prophet that he trusted. Nathan was trusted. Eleazar's trusted. These are people that are trusted to make sure that things continue on when their masters may be too old or unable to do it. And I think that's the fact that the Lord gives people to come alongside you, come alongside people to move the promises forward so that they don't stall out. Feels to me like that's a real big focus on that. And I think it's a great thing to pray for yourself. Like, Lord, give me people in my life that would, move forward. If Stan was opposing everything that the Lord was wanting me to do, it would make for a very contentious, upsetting marriage. You're gonna say something.
I'm definitely no genius by any means, but I'm smart enough to know better than that.
Yeah. But there are people like I had a friend who was a physician, and all of her studies, all of her practice, everything went to, she knew she was supposed to be a missionary, medical missionary to Africa. And she met a guy, and they got married, and he was like, not happening. You can't go there anymore. You're not taking our kids there. And he shut it down. And I kept, in my heart of hearts, I was thinking, man, I'd have the fear of the Lord all over me to tell somebody that knew from the time they were a child, this is what I'm going to do, and put all that money and effort into getting a medical degree, and used to go over there and do that. I mean, we would see videos. Many of you know Stu LeBeau. He went over to Africa with her one time and took videos of her doing these medical missions under trees where all the villagers would come in. It was beautiful. And I kept thinking, dude, I can't believe you're shutting this down. But now they were married, and he didn't do that till after they were married. And, they're still together. And she works at some hospital or whatever. But when you see like a promise and something that you feel like the Lord has called, you want to be surrounded by people that move you on that, rather than people who are naysayers or try to cause delay. And on this, there was going to be no delay. He had a plan, he had a purpose. Show me today, let's get this going, let's leave tomorrow, let's get back there, let's keep it rolling. And I love that.
Yeah, I love it that you've got Abraham's servant who, I think Moses is showing humility for not naming him, but then giving you a clue previously of who this guy really was. But it's kind of a combination of humility, but honor him also.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this servant that's looking for a servant, someone and finds Rebecca, who has a servant heart. So you have all this humility going on that doesn't equal passivity. It equals passion and resolve to do those things that God has said to do. And Rebecca recognized that this was of God, I think. And so she was quick to say, yes, I will go, while she was still had humility in all of it, and a servant's heart. That's what Eleazar had also. He had humility, he had a servant's heart to do what his master had told him to do, and he believed God, to pray to God, and then for God to move. And so there's all this humility going on, but it doesn't equate to passivity. It actually equates to taking action and passion.
Yeah, there's definite passion there. And I find when they finally agree, okay, we're going to send her out, because the beautiful thing about Rebecca too is she's willing to go. She's never seen this guy. She's never been to this land. I'm going to say that it was a bigger thing than well, gee, he gave me a bunch of shiny objects. You know, I've got pretty jewelry now, I'm gonna go, you know, he must be wealthy. I don't think there was this heart of, I'm gonna go. When the Lord tells somebody or puts something on their heart and they say yes and they're willing to go, and it seemed to me like that was her, this seems to be God to me. You know, if this is what you prayed for and this is what I did, then I'm gonna go. And she didn't seem to want to delay. She wasn't like, oh, I've got to spend 10 days with my mom. No, she was like, okay, let's do this, right? And I love the prayer that's prayed over her, verse 59. So they sent Rebekah, their sister, off with her nanny, and Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your seed possess the gate of those who hate him. That's, I mean, we can go all the way back to Genesis 3:15 on that type of statement, on the seed possessing this, but the fact that this is the prayer that's prayed over her, and we know later on, once again, we have another matriarch that's having a really hard time. You know, they conceive, and then she has a hard pregnancy, and, you know, they're saying, may you become thousands of 10,000s. How did they know this? Like, this prayer is amazing to me. It's not like they knew, I don't believe they knew the promises to Abraham on this. This blessing, I believe, is just a really prophetic, from the Spirit of God thing that fell on them to pray something like that. And may your seed possess the gate of those who hate him. What a fascinating prayer. And it's a blessing. I mean, this was the blessing over her. So we're seeing that blessing principle coming even from outsiders onto her. And of course, then we know her descendants are this huge blessing. So it says, then Rebekah got up with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed after the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from visiting Beer-lahai-roi and was living in the land of Negev. Isaac went out to meditate, strolling in the fields at dusk. So there's I guess there's a plug for praying at dusk time, right? And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, camels were coming. Rebekah also lifted up her eyes and saw Isaac, and then fell off her camel.
Great comedic potential there. You see her falling off the camel and jumping back up real fast, dusting herself off and lifting her chin. I meant to do that.
My family and I were laughing about the same thing, about Rebekah falling off.
Oh my gosh. It's like one of my favorite things
I
in the
know.
Bible. It's so funny to me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, yeah, she sees him and she, you know, like struck by lightning, you know, type of thing, you know. And so she falls off her camel. And then she says to her servant, who's that man who's walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, he's my master. So she took the veil and covered herself. Then the servant recounted to Isaac all the things that he had done, so the story's retold again. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after the loss of his mother. So the phrase here, and he loved her, that is now where we had the love of a father for his son. This is now a time that we're shown of a relationship of a love for a man for his wife. It's that exact same word that's used again. And we know that Abraham loved Sarah, but that phrase was never used in their relationship. There was a deep love here all of a sudden, right off the bat. This guy saw this woman, and man, he loved her. We also have, which, fun side note, that she put a veil and covered herself. This is the origin of women wearing veils at weddings. This is our very first wedding ceremony in the Bible. And so that's where that came from, of the veil. And so we have here their little mini wedding ceremony. Obviously, to me it looks like he must, if he brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother, then again he must be back where his mom was living and had passed away. So if he was out visiting, you know, obviously we're roaming around a lot here, but he took her to the tent of Sarah, his mother, and she became his wife. So I would love to see, like, you know, if it's just the two of them and you put a veil on and you're my wife, boom. You know, I mean, we don't see any marriage contracts being signed at this point in time or anything. It's just this covenant love is being made between them. And so now we've got, they're together. The seed is going to continue. We got this guy married off, yay. And now we move on to chapter 25, Abraham's old age and his descendants. Now, Abraham took another wife. Her name was Keturah. And she bore him, and I'm not going to go through all the names. All of these were Keturah's sons. Now, Abraham gave everything he had to Isaac. But to the son of Abraham's concubines, Abraham had given gifts and sent them away from his son Isaac while he was still living eastward to the land of the east. So, why were all of these people being sent away from Isaac? Why do you think? Why did his brothers have to move away?
Bad company.
Any other suggestions?
I think it's like if they're away, you're in an infighting, someone's been sent away because honestly, to be given everything, I mean, that's jealousy, produces jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
And, but almost like a stream narrowing that, sea promises, it gets pretty narrow at times. And it seems like there may be some intentionality in keeping it pure, keeping it simple, keeping it streamlined. Less things can happen that will go wrong. And,
Could be, yeah. Well, and we also, taking the example of the half-Torah portion of David, we have his sons instituting themselves, his son instituting himself as king when he wasn't. So that infighting, that type of thing, we could have here, let's say, we don't know how strong of a personality Isaac is. You know, most people kind of view him as being pretty passive from the way he's written in this. So if you've got 6 brothers, and we see this over and over again, you got 6 brothers, and they're there, who's to say that they won't decide, we're going to take this. This is going to be our land, this is going to be... So yeah, in Abraham's wisdom, he sent these guys to the east. And he had to do the same thing right off the bat with Ishmael, right? I mean, otherwise, can you imagine if the two of them had grown up together in the midst of all of this that was going on? And it seems like from our perspective as a parent, to say, this is my favorite kid and the rest of you all go away, that seems really off or harsh. But that's not the dynamic that's going on. This dynamic here going on is not that Abraham didn't love these sons. He gave them gifts. I believe he was deeply concerned about his other kids. I mean, if he didn't care about them, he wouldn't have even given them gifts, right? This all has to do with moving the promise forward. This promise has to have a future, and he's trying to remove any snares from that future. But again, I think it probably made Isaac's life very lonely, which is why Rebecca was so important in his life. Because if you keep getting isolated, that's got to be rough. It's just, and it makes you think with the mourning of his mom and needing to be comforted after the death of his mom, he was probably pretty close to this woman. And, we don't know if he played with the servant kids or, that type of thing. It doesn't really tell you. But we just know that he's basically, in a sense, an only child, even though he has all of these brothers. He's being set apart as an only child.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think also too, it's this, they sending these brothers away, because it's like, he's not, it does say he gave them gifts, so I think they were well provided for, which again speaks to the incredible amount of wealth that Abraham has accumulated.
Yeah.
If he's able to basically, set up all these sons, even though he's sending them away. And it's also like, right, part of the promise to Abraham is that the father of many nations.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all still meant to be part of the same family. And earlier when you were talking about the Jew and Arab relations and things like that, and Asher's work in that, and he has a book called Alignment, where he even from a biblical standpoint lays out, like, Ishmael is supposed to be, like we talked about, Ishmael was circumcised. He's part of the covenant too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so all these descendants of even all these other brothers, even though they ultimately become other nations, are supposed to still be part of the family. And history is very complicated with all of that, but that's why it's such a big deal when we do see unity between, especially Messianic Jew and Arab Christian. Like we see, at least a little bit of what that was meant to be, what this family dynamic was meant to be. And so, but it's also, but also in like Abraham knowing he has to send these other sons away because of some of these family dynamics, like we're talking about, and how, Isaac is often painted as not the powerful, assertive personality. He is the only patriarch who lives his whole life in the land, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because I think God also knows the hearts of people and knows this power struggle and all, these things that are very likely to come out. But I think even though these other sons are sent away, it doesn't mean that they're not supposed to have some kind of family relationship and be well, and serve the one true God.
Yeah.
So it's not, so it's an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is also, this is the son that the Lord has said the covenant goes through. And also there's these other sons, and they also actually do have a role to play.
Yeah.
Even though we don't get, like the Bible is giving us a story through a particular line.
Mm-hmm.
So another one of those things where it'd be really interesting to have some other perspectives of some of these situations.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they're being cast out of the family of God, is I think maybe
exactly
a way to look at it.
Yeah. And we do see, like, I love the fact that they list Keturah's sons' names, because we see Midian in there. And we know that Moses married Zipporah, who was a Midianite. And so with Jethro being a Midianite priest. So we see these connectivities all these years later. And, it didn't seem like there was animosity at that point in time. Everybody was just kind of living their own lives.
My dear, you were most excellent.
Thanks. Go take care of the puppy. She can't be in the crate that long. Faith, you just say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's another opportunity to see the wisdom of God that we can see in our own lives if we will trust God to really choose our spouse, choose our friends, those who are in our inner circle, those who we have contact with but not an intimate relationship with. And if we'll trust him with that, I mean, he's able to break up codependent relationships, just things that would be toxic for all the parties, and then restore it all in the end if we'll trust him.
Yeah.
With that, all the aspects of our lives, but that in particular, I think, coming out.
Yeah, yeah. So we have here, he gives them gifts, sends them eastward, and it said, now in verse 7, now these are the days of the years of Abraham's life that he lived. He was 175 years old. So Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, old and satisfied. How nice is that, to die satisfied, right? And I feel like he was satisfied because he had purchased land and his son was married and things were progressing forward. And then he was gathered to his people, and then I love this. Then Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave. So, with his wife, Sarah. So we have here Isaac and Ishmael coming back together to bury their dad. If Ishmael had had a huge chip on his shoulder, you know, or felt this massive rejection, he may have not shown up, which makes you wonder, to me, I can't help but wonder, maybe there was still some sort of a good relationship that was still going on here. Because it doesn't say then Ishmael and Isaac got together and fought over things, or, you know, they buried their dad. Ishmael came back to bury him. So if there was this real heavy rejection or whatever, he came back to honor his dad. And so the two of them coming together to do this, I'm not going to say they were best buddies, but they did the right thing. And some of you, like, you know, many of you know, I buried my mom a year ago last March, and things were really rough towards the end, and there was a lot of disagreement, especially between the end medical taken care of between my brother and I. And but when Mom passed, you do the right thing, you all come together and you bury your mom, right? You put the differences aside, and you're mature adults, and you do what you're supposed to do. And I feel like any differences that were going on here, they put them aside, they came together, and they buried Abraham. And I think it's beautiful, and I think it's also honoring of Isaac in the fact that he came and did that, and then the whole last part of this chapter, they give you Ishmael's genealogy on this. They let you know what came forth from him, because he was promised, Hagar was promised, your son will be a prince, you know, he'll have these tribes, he'll prosper. And we're seeing here at the death of Abraham, we're being given that list that, yes, Ishmael prospered. Yes, Ishmael had all of these kids. He's okay, you know? We've got this son of promise, but Ishmael's okay. And I kind of feel like that's like a nice little ceiling of, and they lived happily ever after, although we know they don't. But we still see the fact that how things were meant to be at this point in time, this was exactly God's plan, his purposes, and things went exactly how he said they were going to go.
Why do you think it says, over against all his brothers he fell? I mean, is that just a way of wording?
He fell. It says, you said, he fell.
It says,
That's the verse.
Mine's
It's
the
one of the
very last verse
translations.
of the portion.
yeah, that's one of the translations.
Over against all his brothers he fell.
Does anybody say something different?
What's the actual verse?
It's 25 verse 18.
Yeah.
No, mine says he settled in defiance of his relatives.
Yeah.
And I did look that up, and it was, I can't remember the Hebrew word, I didn't note it here. Is that the one you're talking about?
The very
Yeah.
last of the.
Yeah, the Hebrew word means
He
fell.
settled in defiance of all of his relatives.
And did he? Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
see the opposition to this day. So,
That word, so that word is, that's the common Hebrew word to fall, and the fall, same one you covered, earlier. But here, I guess it depends on the version, like how it's translated, because every one of those Hebrew words, it has a range of meanings. But it's interesting, it's the same word, like she fell off the camel, and that's the
yeah.
word fall, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it does set you up for the fact that now we've got to we got a future of opposition going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
You know, and God is always good about, like in these writings, to get you set up for what's gonna go next, or what's coming up, and to make sure the names and the players are mentioned in the midst of all this, so that you can go all this, 400 years later, and you can go, oh, well, this ties all the way back, and it's always tying all the way back to Abraham. It normally doesn't go back to, and when, they don't take it back to Adam, they don't take it back to Noah. Normally, when the writings are going on, they always start the story with Abraham, because that's where this covenant starts. This is where the Lord is now establishing a people, and this man is promised the seed, the land, and the blessing. And the fact that it says that when Abraham died, it says the Lord blessed Isaac. And so we've got this blessing going forward. And it's time to stop.
One quick note,
Uh-huh.
someone mentioned in one of the videos addressing the whole thing of some people trying to say that the land doesn't belong to Israel. They made the point that we have the historic record of Abraham buying that
Yeah.
property.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how far back the actual historic record of the legal
Well, yeah,
passage
and-
of title.
Yeah, and we had discussed the fact that he bought that, and to this day, they know that's his land because it's still honored as that. That spot is never changed hands. It's always been that location. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.